Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of
the United States
of America,
and to the republic for
for
which
which it stands,
one nation, under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty and
and
justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mr. Carson,
Here.
Dr. Fike,
Here.
Mrs. Love, Mr. Polakowski,
Here.
Mrs. Raymond,
Here.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
Here.
Mrs. Christy Smith,
Here.
Mrs. Rhodes,
Here.
Mrs. Williams,
Here.
For the record, Mrs. Love did indicate she would not be present this evening.
All right, we're going to move on to temporary chairperson.
It is recommended that the board appoint a board member as temporary chairperson for the purpose of reorganization.
We'll take nominees at this time.
I'll nominate Christy Smith.
I missed what we're nominating for. My internet said unstable.
For temporary chairperson?
Oh.
Any other nominees? So then I guess we would need a motion we'd need a motion and a second that Christy then would be appointed as temporary chair. So I need a motion.
Close nominations, right?
I'll make the motion.
Yeah, I guess close the nominations first and then Mr. Carson's making the nomination.
Yeah, Dave.
I'll make the motion that we close
second.
nominations.
All right, thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
I believe, do we have to do a voice vote then, I believe? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 The ayes have it. Now, I believe it was Mr. Carson that made the motion. I need a second on the temporary chair nominee. I need a second.
Make
Jason,
the second.
That was Jason, okay. So then Christy then now is appointed the temporary chairperson for the purpose of reorganization. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, Christy.
So does that mean I do citizens comments? I don't even know what temporary chairperson means. Thanks, Jim.
Someone had to do it.
So Mrs. Tarzan, do we have any citizens comments?
Mr. Masha, can you read the letter that came from Molly Fee?
Yes. Okay, good morning, Mrs. Tarzan. I can't remember how to make public comment to the school board, so I thought I might be able to pass it on to you. As a Southmoreland parent, I wanted to thank Mr. Masha and the board for all of their efforts in keeping our students and staff as safe as possible during this crazy year. And I wanted to compliment the 7th grade teachers and Mrs. Zeffro and Mrs. Schaefer in 3rd grade for their communication and effort in providing my kids the opportunity to learn from home. We are having a decent year despite the strange circumstances. Sincerely, Molly Fee.
And Mr. Jan Kiefer?
Thank you. Jan Kiefer, Homestead Avenue, Scottsdale. At the last meeting during suspension of rules and after the parliamentary move reversing a vote, after the last agenda item, which is public comment, at the point of adjournment, Mrs. Williams rose to and ultimately had a very impactful non-agenda motion passed, namely closing the schools. I don't know if raising the subject was a spur of the moment on her part or anyone conspired to also bring this subject to the floor using this procedure. I do know this repeated almost monthly, almost defiant of the spirit of the parliamentary process. This habit has a consequence of legislation without representation, without the opportunity for the public to comment when this procedure is taken. You can't comment unless you are the paper company or a citizen who has the privilege to have a personal contact with a board member during meetings. The masks you are making the students wear are shedding, and they're being breathed in by the students, and this can cause disease. The oxygen levels inside the mask are 17.5%, and the OSHA minimum is above that for occupancy for a room. There are some constants with the virtual learning. It would be vision damage and electromagnetic field damage, coupled with an elevation in suicide rates that dwarfed the school shooting numbers. Yet we saw the reaction to the school shootings and the zero reaction to this. Government agencies last spring asked you to adopt behaviors to build your immunity, including nutritional choices. Our community today would be in a higher health level if you would have complied with that government request. We all have different opinions about science, we all have different opinions, but underlying our opinions is science, and we must follow its verification. Most people don't know how to judge a good scientist from a bad one. Prior to making policy, please tell us this year's Westmoreland County death toll compared to the last few years. And if you can tell us nationwide and worldwide, I would like to know that number. I'm sure you have the resources. I haven't been able to answer that. I never joined the lesser of two evils. Screen learning at home is no way to go through childhood, or even a winter, or even another week. Sitting in an indoor classroom is out of the question for many people. Children starting right now would benefit from outdoor compulsory education schooling modeled from cultures that struggle ongoingly with viruses. As a commissioned officer, Mr. Masha, for the Department of Health, the public expects you to demonstrate an awareness and a command of opposing viewpoints rather than cite your agency's directives. Agencies that carry little or no credibility anymore for many Americans, I will remind you. When they have steered you wrong so many times, you start to question your department's long-standing critics. Yes, the virus is real. It kills. It's easily spread. But not much else that you are following can stand up a good public debate. Not your testing and not your figures that you built your decision on last week. We need the opportunity in a task force setting, not a public comment period, to deconstruct that argument that has resulted in the legislation that you passed. So when are we going to start talking about vaccination? Is that going to be a task force bill?
You have 30 seconds left.
We would also say the virus is man-made by the scientific direction. It was accidentally or purposely released. It could be released in a more viral and deadly form. And we just don't know where we're going with this. So it's time to loosen up and do some radical changes in your school philosophy in these radical times that we live in. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Tarzan, are there any more citizens' comments?
Mr. Chuck Moore, did he, come on, Mr. Pushkar?
I don't see anybody waiting.
Okay, then that was all.
Okay, then we'll move on to election of president for a term of 1 year. Are there any nominations for board president?
I would like to nominate Michelle Williams.
I'll second that.
Second's not required.
I withdraw the second.
Are there any other nominations? Can I have a motion to close nominations if there are no more?
You're supposed to ask 3 times.
One more time, are there any other nominations? Can I have a motion to close the nominations, please?
I will make that motion.
And a second?
I'll second Smith.
Thank you. So do we do a roll call for this, Mr. Botonic?
No, do a voice vote to close nominations.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. So we will take, do we do it? What do we do?
Well, since only one person was nominated, you can ask for a motion for the secretary to cast a unanimous ballot.
Okay, Mrs. Tarzan, can we have a motion for Mrs. Tarzan to cast a unanimous ballot for Mrs. Williams?
I'll make that motion too.
And a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay, so
Mrs. Williams
congratulations,
elected.
Mrs. Williams. You are now the president and my duty's over.
That was short. Election of vice president for a term of 1 year.
I nominate Christy Smith.
I'll second that.
Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations for vice president for 1 year?
I'd like to make a motion that we close nominations.
I'll second that.
Nominations for the office of vice president are closed.
No, just ask for a voice vote. I'm sorry.
Can I have a voice vote?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Opposed? Ayes have it. Christy Smith is vice president.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Williams. Ask for a motion for the secretary to cast a unanimous ballot. We'll work through it.
Sorry. Mrs. Tarzan, can I have a motion for unanimous ballot?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Ask if all are in favor.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. Christy Smith is vice president. Legislative chairperson,
It is necessary to appoint a representative from the Southmoreland School Board to represent the school district and PSBA's legislative action program at county level meetings. He should present legislative updates to the board regularly and should prompt the board to submit suggested items for PSBA legislative platform.
Mr. Tasha, is this what I do now with the COLA meetings, or is that a whole different thing?
No, this is a different thing, Mrs. Smith.
Okay.
Who was this person this past year? Was it Mrs. Rhodes?
Was it you, Mrs. Rhodes? Yes.
I'd like to nominate Gail Rhodes if she wants to continue doing it.
Are there any other nominations?
Nominate Christy Smith.
Are there any other nominations? I need a motion to close the nominations for the appointment of legislative chairperson.
Make the motion that we close nominations for legislative chairperson.
I need a second.
Second.
Nominations for the appointment of legislative chairperson are now closed. You need a voice vote to close nominations for legislative chairperson.
Aye.
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 Now I will need a roll call vote to appoint legislative chairperson.
To save time, Michelle, I'll withdraw my name for that. Because Mr. Carson nominated Christy Smith for that, so that's fine. I'll withdraw that, my name.
Mrs. Smith, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. There being only one vote or one nominee, we can move to unanimous ballot for Christy Smith as legislative chairperson for a period of 1 year.
Need a motion?
I'll make the motion for unanimous ballot for Christy Smith.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Christy Smith is the legislative chairperson. Election of PSBA liaison.
Board is asked to appoint a representative to the PSBA Regional Cabinet. This person is a liaison between the board and PSBA.
I'll make a motion for Michelle Williams. Is that typically the president?
No,
That you weren't it last time?
yeah, I was.
Oh, okay.
But I've been it for, I've done that for many years.
Okay.
So are there any other nominees? And am I allowed to nominate someone?
I guess.
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to nominate Gail Rhodes. Are there any other nominees? Do we have to go through that same procedure, Mr. Petonic?
Just to be consistent, motion to close nominations, first, second, somebody speak up.
Okay. I need a motion to close the nominations.
I'll make a motion to close nominations.
I'll second.
Voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
I'd like to withdraw my name. So that will leave Gail. So we need a motion to move to unanimous ballot.
That motion.
I need a second.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And Gail Rhodes is PSBA liaison. Board meeting calendar?
It is recommended that the monthly planning sessions of the Southmoreland Board of Education and the monthly regular business sessions of the Southmoreland Board of Education be held each month during the 2021 as per the attached schedule at 7 p.m. Meetings are virtual via Zoom link and available live on YouTube for the public until further notice. The secretary is authorized and directed to give public notice, including advertising, the schedule of public meetings, not less than 3 days before the first meeting. And I do believe, Mrs. Williams, that there was a question concerning the time for executive session.
Yes. So on this paper, it says that the start time is 6:30 p.m. We've been starting executive sessions at 6 p.m. I also had a question for Mr. Patonic, because I know last year whenever we went through and we did this, then there was some issues with some of the dates not lining up. Are these dates all going to line up with what we need to do with Act 1 in the budget?
No, you're going to be amending it as you proceed down to item number it's under new business item 2, Act 1. So you'll be adding to it, maybe.
And can we table it until we get down there and figure out what we're doing?
I don't know that it makes a difference either way.
Well, voting once or twice.
And do we want to change the time to 6 p.m.?
Yes.
So I'll need a motion to accept the board meeting calendar.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Well, because you're advertising, that we want a roll call vote.
Okay. Roll call?
Mr. Carson,
Yes.
Dr. Fike, Dr. Fike,
Yes, yes.
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes,
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries 8 yes, 1 absent.
Newspaper of general circulation.
The board is asked to designate the Daily Courier, whose office is located at 127, 129 Apple Street, Connellsville, PA, as the daily newspaper of general circulation, in which district legal advertisements will be placed in accordance with Section 10 of the Public School Code and School District Policy Guide Number 5.
I need a motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
Discussion? I have a question. Do we know what the difference is as far as, we've had a lot that we've needed to advertise, and I know with the Daily Courier, there's a lot of issues with times and dates and will we have enough time? Is the Tribune Review any better about that?
No, the Tribune Review goes out during the middle of the night. And with the Daily Courier, if I get stuff to them by maybe 9:30 at the latest in the morning, then it can still go, the day after I have better luck getting into the Daily Courier quicker than the Tribune Review.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Was there any other discussion? Roll call?
Dr. Fike,
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes,
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Carson,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
motion carries 8 yes, 1 absent.
Minutes of the November 12th, 2020 meeting.
The board is asked to consider the approval of the minutes of the November 12th, 2020 school board meeting, which are attached.
I need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Minutes of the November 19th, 2020 meeting.
The board is asked to consider the approval of the minutes of the November 19th, 2020 school board meeting, which are attached.
I need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Candace Raymond and Christy Smith. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Superintendent's information.
Yes, I'd like to start out by congratulating Mrs. Williams and Mrs. Smith for taking leadership roles in our school board. I also would like to recognize Mr. Daniel Clara. Mr. Daniel Clara is now Dr. Daniel Clara. He successfully defended his doctoral presentation last Friday, so we're very proud to have Mr. Clara as Dr. Clara. I know it's going to be a topic of discussion later on, but I would like to recommend that the district remain in remote until either the end of the first semester, which is January 22nd, or until the district has experienced 2 successive moderate levels. And I also would like to recommend that the district follow the no spectator policy for sports until we also get 2 successive moderate levels in the readings. And that would be all my report, Mrs. Williams.
Solicitor's information.
I don't have any additional information beyond having worked on the Act 1 resolution, which is down under new business item 2. And then you have the competing resolutions for copying machines under number 3. I just wanted to point out there that both entities presented both the 60-month fixed price and the 60-month cost per copy approach, plus print management services for the 16 HP district-owned printers, distinguishing them from the copiers. Thank you.
Business manager's information.
I have no special report this evening. Thank you.
Do we not have a treasurer's report or a fund account balance this month?
Those are always presented during the normal monthly school board business meeting. So no, not this month. Unless you have a subsequent meeting this month, Then we can prepare them and submit them.
Then I have a relevant question. There was a budget committee meeting scheduled for the middle of the month. I would like to know if it's going to be held. I'd like to know who's on that committee. And also, there was always the intention that Mr. Mornell would be present at a meeting such as that. Can you tell me what the decision is regarding that?
Well, I think as far as on the committee, I believe that that would be, well, if the committees are going to stand the way they are, then it was,
I would say that the committees are going to stand the way they are for at least this month, probably moving into the beginning of January. So if you have meetings scheduled, by all means, it should remain those people. I think that would have been Mrs. Rhodes, Dr. Fike, and Mrs. Raymond.
correct.
It's for
Correct.
December 15th. It's for December 15th. at 2
Yes,
o'clock
well, I was going to confer with Mr. Mornell as to whether something like that would be something we would have, or you know, if the information, I'm not quite sure what all he would have ready for us at that time. So upon further discussion with him, then that will determine whether we go ahead with that meeting or not. So we still have time to make a decision on that.
Really, Gail? It
Well,
would
today's
depend-
Monday, that's next
Yeah, it's
next
next
Tuesday.
Wednesday.
I think we have time. I would say we have time to do, you know.
It's up to him to determine whether we.
No,
need-
I said we would have a discussion and make a determination as to whether we need to go forward or not, whether we can go forward with, if there's any information that we really would have to have a discussion on.
Well, Michelle, I have a related question then. Are we going to start to have regular budget meetings beginning in January?
Well, I think that according to the Act One timeline that Mr. Petonic put together, there are some questions that need to be answered relatively soon for us to make any determinations about Act One. Is that right, Mr. Petonic?
Well, you're going to be voting to pick certain meeting dates in January for the purpose of making a decision to move forward with a proposed preliminary budget or to opt out. And under item B, I'm sorry, that's not right. Under item D of that resolution, there is, if you use that deadline, for the business manager to present a draft proposed preliminary budget on January 14th, 2021. Now, if the school board wants to do something more in December, then that's up to the board to pick a month or pick a date in December if that's feasible. But that what I've given you in that special resolution would be, I don't know how to say it, the minimum necessary to keep both of those options open into January.
Well, then what is the function of the budget committee then? I guess I don't understand.
Well, you can have budget committee meetings also in addition to what is in that resolution, but I don't control when they meet. That's the president or the committee,
There's no
advertise those. I'm sorry.
point in meeting then, is that right? There's
I
no
can't
point
hear
in
you.
meeting? There's no point in meeting then?
Point in meeting when? Which?
Any, the budget committee, is there a reason for them to meet?
That's not my,
Okay,
that's not a legal decision. That's up to you folks.
okay.
So I'm reading in here that as far as us having a draft budget, what's going to hold that up is having our annual financial report done, which should have already been done but isn't done, So when do we presume that that would be done in order for the budget committee to meet with Mr. Marnell?
I'd like to add a question onto that. I thought that was due October 31st. Is that correct? But this letter looks like an extension was asked for at the end of November.
Yes, Department of Education gives you until November 30th to complete your annual financial report.
Is it due October 31st?
That is in the old school code.
The current school code?
Yes.
Okay, so why wasn't it done by October 31st?
It's nearly impossible for a small office like us to get it done. And that's why the Department of Education gives all districts until November 30th. If I wasn't done with if I wasn't down with the COVID virus for about 25 days during November, it would have been done before Thanksgiving break. It would have been a non-issue. But I didn't get back to work until Monday, November 30th. So that's why it wasn't done. And that's why we applied for an extension and got it for the extenuating circumstances for my being sick.
Do we know when this will be done?
Oh, yes. I've been working on it since I came back, working with our auditor. So we work hand in hand together. And while I was down for over 3 weeks, there wasn't anything that I could do at home. So much depends on me because I'm the business manager and the finance director, and it doesn't get done if I'm not there to work on it.
Well, my concern is this, we were to have this meeting on December 15th. I could be wrong, but from December 15th till the district isn't at work anymore, it's like 7 or 8 days or something like that. And then they're off for the rest of the year. And this thing is supposed to be turned in by December 30th. So we're talking about meeting a few days before this document is completed. Am I right?
You don't need the AFR to work on next year's budget. AFR is a report of last year, the 1920 fiscal year.
Okay.
Well, we haven't yet been given the final numbers of last year.
Budget. I'm sorry, say again.
We haven't yet been given the final numbers of last school year, such as what the surplus was, which we've been asking about.
Well, that will be completed when the audit and financial report are done.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That is dependent on next year's budget, in my mind.
Well, next year.
That's what Dr. Fike's saying.
Budget is the 21-22 school year. It's not dependent on that.
No, it is to me, if we had a surplus at the end of last year, which was expected, from what you had said, that does change things for me because I don't want to have another surplus that big like we have in the past few years because there's things we need. So determining if we had a huge surplus, plus we have 3 contracts we're working on, which would be helpful to know what's going on that way.
Now remember, you have until, what day is that, Mr. Petonic, that you proposed for the final budget? June 24th? And we have to pass a tentative budget in May. So, you will have plenty of months during the winter to, once the December is over and we have the annual financial report and the auditor completes the audit, you will know what the final unreserved fund balance is. And you'll have that information during the whole winter months, for January onward. So,
but Jim, how are we supposed to vote on Act 1, whether we're going to, exceed it or stay within it? Why would we need to talk about a tax increase? We have a whole constituency out there who has suffered a year of the COVID. They have to worry about paying their bills, paying their taxes. We have to vote as to how we're going to act on Act 1. So in order to do that,
we're very limited now because there are only 2 exceptions, and we did not qualify for those 2 exceptions last year, and we will not qualify for them this year because the base in those indexes were fixed years ago, and everybody's moving away from those bases. So really your decision is your Act 1, excuse me, it's hard to have long conversations with this viral
Okay, well, you answered
That's your decision.
No, if we don't have numbers.
the question.
Do you think you could approve an act? Then we'll do an Act One budget. But again, you have to remember, just like last January, there's so many unknowns. So they will be very rough numbers. There will be estimates, and then we will work from there. So don't expect a final budget in January. It'll be a starting draft.
Mr. Petonic?
I can't, as your solicitor, presuppose whether or not you want to do an Act One budget. I try to preserve reasonable options in the event that you thought it would be necessary to go down that road, or if you just wanted to keep the option open for, a decision later in January. I think there's a bit of I'm not sure if maybe there's some misunderstanding, but just as a suggestion, would it be more practical to have a finance committee meeting on January 7th? And at that point, maybe some of these other questions could be supplied by Mr. Marnell, and there would already be a date chosen for still pursuing a proposed preliminary budget or opting out. It seems like December is really difficult this year. So the 7th is not a regular meeting night. The 14th and 21st are, and maybe you're going to need the 28th also. So that might be a different way of just kind of setting up a decision tree.
Would January 7th be acceptable to the Finance Committee for your finance meeting, budget meeting with Mr. Marnell?
You mean as a committee or as a board?
As the committee.
Okay, because it says here January 7th, not a regular Thursday meeting. And it says you receive a draft budget or Act One preliminary budget.
I believe it says that you can receive it that date or the 14th.
Yes.
Mr. Petonic.
Right, and there are multiple, I gave you an outline that has multiple different options in it. And we had attempted, supplying that kind of information in past years. Unfortunately, this year, Mr. Marnell's indicated to you what's been happening with his situation. So, I was trying to keep options open, but, I can't be in that document definitive about what you decide about some of these optional paths. So I try to present different options to you as to whether it's really practical to do a finance committee meeting or another board meeting on budget in December, or do something at the very beginning of January and still keep one of those other dates or two of them open.
This is kind of a yes or no thing. Is our unreserved, uncommitted fund balance going to exceed 8% of our general fund?
Now that you have to realize that the craziness of this under the school code is that number relates to not 2021, but 21, 22.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And predicting that.
So that will not be answered until you have a proposed final budget in May, and there's a special document that goes with that budget. It's an official budget that has to be produced on the state form PDE 2028. And there's a form that goes with that stating that your unreserved fund balance for the 21-22 fiscal year will be 8% or less, or else they will not allow you to raise taxes. You'll have to adjust your tax rate so that your unreserved fund balance doesn't exceed 8%. So we're a few months away from that hurdle.
What
Can you
about the
tell us
issue
what
of
it is right now?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information. And of course, the 2021 school year is not over yet, so the fund balance isn't completed. We have 6+ months left of financial information to be entered.
Can you tell us what it was at the end of the last school year?
Around 2.4 million, but I don't have last year's financials with me here tonight.
Okay, thanks.
But it also says in this that we have to look at the issue of furloughs starting to plan in January. And that includes financial data.
So are we okay for the finance committee to meet with Mr. Marnell on the 7th? Does that work for everyone?
Yes.
Mr. Marnell?
That works for myself. I asked the.
That'll work for me, fine.
That's fine.
That will allow him time to get the AFR finished, and we wouldn't be cutting into time that should be spent on that. Are you
Still,
at that, Dr. Fike?
yeah, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's when the last one was scheduled, 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Is that okay for everyone? Gail,
That's
Candace?
okay with me.
Yeah, that's
Marnell,
fine.
Is that okay?
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
And that's a Zoom meeting, right?
Yes.
JCWS information only.
Mrs. Williams, that is just for informational purposes only at this point in
That
time.
was just those were follow-ups from Jacobs Creek.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to new business, emergency instructional plan amendment.
Whereas the World Health Organization has declared the current outbreak of COVID-19 a global pandemic, and whereas the Pennsylvania Department of Education has determined that COVID-19 pandemic constitutes an emergency within the meaning of Section 520.1 of the Public School Code, and whereas the Southmoreland School Board is aware that the categories of transmission of COVID-19 as to Westmoreland County and as to Fayette County portions as per the table below are in a substantial category requiring full remote learning for the periods ending November 19th, 2020 and November 26th, 2020, being 2 consecutive weeks in both counties. Whereas the Board of School Directors has determined that the risks COVID-19 presents to our students, faculty, and community requires an extraordinary response. Whereas the Board of School Directors on August 27, 2020 had approved its first resolution pursuant to School Code Section 520.1 approving hybrid instructional plan with teachers physically present and most students alternating in an A-B plan of physical in-school presence and remote presence with each group having 50% physical presence and 50% distance learning over 10 school days. Whereas the school board on October 26, 2020 approved going to a total virtual model. Whereas the school board voted on November 12, 2020 to return to the AB hybrid plan, regardless of whether there had been 2 successive weeks of the substantial category or not. Whereas on November 19, 2020, the school board voted to return to the total distance learning model effective on December 1st, 2020, but only for the period until December 14th, 2020, depending on its reconsideration on December 7th, 2020. Whereas the superintendent is not recommending a return from total virtual to the hybrid model unless the Westmoreland County has 2 successive weeks of moderate COVID transmission. Whereas on November 23rd, 2020, Governor Tom Wolf issued an order of the Governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania directing public school entities in counties with substantial community transmission to attest the health and safety protocols effective November 30th, 2020, stating in Section 2 as follows. Section 2. Requirements for public school entities operating with in-person learning in counties in a substantial range of community transmission as described in the determining instructional model during the COVID-19 pandemic. Whenever any public school entity is providing in-person instruction, that public school entity, through its chief school administrator and chair president of its governing body, must attest through their execution of an attestation that they, A, have read the updated order of the Secretary of the Pennsylvania Department of Health requiring universal face coverings effective November 18th, 2020, including necessary exceptions and associated guidance, and that the public school entity is complying and will continue to comply with and enforce the update order of the Secretary of the Pennsylvania Department of Health requiring universal face coverings, including necessary exceptions and associated guidance. B, having read the recommendations for pre-K-12 schools following identification of cases of COVID-19, and as cases of COVID-19 occur within the public school entity will comply with the recommendations for pre-K to 12 schools following identification of cases of COVID-19. Whereas pursuant to Section 3 of the order of the failure to sign the attestation or having signed the failure to follow the order would require a fully remote model and suspension of extracurricular activities. Whereas the PDE attestation form only provided 2 attestation options. First, oval requiring current and continuing compliance with the Secretary of Health's order of November 18th, 2020, referring to universal face coverings and following recommendations for pre-K in 12 schools following identification of cases of COVID-19 when cases occur within the school entity of which the district has been observing. Or the second oval stating as follows: the public school entity has transitioned to a fully remote learning model and will continue to use a fully remote learning model until the county or counties in which the public school entity is located is no longer experiencing substantial disease transmission for 2 consecutive weeks. A public school entity in a county with substantial levels of disease transmission that is currently providing a fully remote learning model and that elects to transfer to in-person instruction must resubmit this attestation prior to providing in-person instruction. Whereas, because of the board's resolution of November 19th, 2020, there was a temporal limit as to the length of remaining distance learning beginning after Thanksgiving recess on December 1st, 2020 to December 13th, 2020, rather than being dependent upon whether there had been 2 successive weeks of the district's counties not being in a substantial category. The only true and accurate choice and statement for the superintendent and the board president as of November 22nd and November 23rd, 2020, and November 30th, 2020, absent board action, was the first oval, and such attestation choosing the first oval was done on November 22nd, 2020, and submitted to the Pennsylvania Department of Education. The term distance virtual or remote learning shall mean that the teacher is not physically present with the students and that the instruction is conducted primarily over the internet with the students not physically present at the school, and in some instances by educational packets in physical form and with opportunities for telephone and electronic communications between students and teachers, and more fully described below.
Mr. Masha, I believe that items 1 through 4 are exact duplications of what has been utilized in the past, and that with permission of the board, you could waive reading all those because they are stated completely there, and move to item 5 to save a little bit of time there to get to the changes.
Is that okay with the board?
Yes.
Yes.
The school board hereby ratifies and approves the following initial plan. A, the primary, elementary, middle, and high school, all currently distance, virtual, remote learning, remote, will remain in effect until at least the conclusion of 2 successive weeks of the district's 2 counties being out of substantial category. Primary regular education, distance virtual. Primary special education, distance virtual. Elementary regular education, distance virtual. Elementary special education, distance virtual. Middle school regular education, distance virtual. Middle school special education, distance virtual. High school regular education, distance virtual. High school special education, distance virtual. B, the administration has supplied the following to demonstrate how instructional time for students as time in the school day devoted to instruction and instructional activities will be under the direction of certified school employees, whether synchronous or asynchronous, and what and how clearly defined systems for tracking attendance and instructional time will be implemented to ensure student engagement in remote instruction. As to Southmoreland High School, all classes being taught shall be distance, virtual, remote, and only synchronous as set forth in the plan submitted by Principal Daniel Krofcheck, attached hereto and incorporated by reference. Sample modules are developed so that teachers can plan to maintain pacing with district curriculum. Students will receive the full course curriculum, and students and teachers will be able to easily pivot from an alternating model to either fully online or fully in-person instruction if and when needed. Each grade level and subject will look a little different, but the framework will be the same. Please note, activities and assignments will be explained in depth by the teacher, both in person and in Google Classroom. The activities marked independent can be completed on days when students are at home. Students will take into consideration what they feel teachers will take into consideration what they feel students can complete independently, asynchronously. All materials needed for the independent activities will be posted in Google Classroom. If students are working on an activity independently but are having difficulty, they will have the opportunity to ask for guidance the following day. The activities marked teacher guidance will be completed on the days the students are present with their teachers. Students will be expected to log on to the Google form daily so that the attendance records can be maintained. Assessments will be formative and ongoing. C. Section B above is hereby amended by the following document entitled Extended School Closures, including workday, work requirements, Google Classroom requirements, office hours, professional dress, meetings, and resources, or stated immediately hereafter are incorporated by reference. D. Non-teaching staff who have not or do not obtain approval of an accommodation are required to report to their respective school building except as separately stated herein.
Mr. Nash, I think that under that first category, list those categories of employees, if any, to work from home regardless of accommodation. That would be that limited circumstance where someone has been identified, and it's probably only going to relate to when you go to hybrid, or if you do go to hybrid in this option. But you could read that one sentence.
Which one, Dave? The list of categories for employees to be furloughed or remain below that, or I'm not certain.
Yes, you'd read it right now as meeting that one sentence. I'll read it for you. And you tell me if you agree. Teachers who were or will be required to quarantine or isolate, even though not personally ill, i.e. close contact, who are otherwise able and available to work and are working by teleworking, are considered working and do not need to claim personal accrued sick days or sick leave. In addition, they wouldn't have to report because they're supposed to be isolating or quarantining. Follow me?
Yes. List those categories of employees to be furloughed or remain in furlough: cafeteria and maintenance, except those necessary for snow removal. Okay,
And that would be cafeteria for those providing I don't know what to call them, the boxed meals or the
daily lunch.
daily lunch.
That does not include the custodians then.
Should say cafeteria and custodians?
Yeah, that should be custodians, not maintenance,
Yeah, mine says maintenance.
because we have not furloughed any maintenance.
Well, is this document to be changed then?
I do believe that it should be custodial. Would that be correct, Mr. Batani?
Okay, you're listing those categories of employees to be furloughed or remain in furlough. So cafeteria and custodians, except those necessary for snow removal. And then underneath that, those who are necessary are cafeteria for daily lunches. And who else do you need in the building?
Maintenance and still some custodial staff.
Thank you. And that would be to clean up after the folks in the cafeteria and for any teachers who have to report
Yes, and any
Okay.
staff, any office staff or
in the
anywhere.
office.
You take the word maintenance out.
Yes, ma'am. That should be custodial. And there are two options, E1 and E2. E1, not recommended by superintendent or solicitor. E1, the school board authorizes the return to AB hybrid plan on December 14th, 2020. The superintendent is authorized and directed to take all steps necessary to revert to the AB hybrid plan as of the effective date, regardless of whether or not there are 2 successive weeks of this district's counties being moderate transmission, and regardless of the recommendations of the Pennsylvania Department of Health. But the school board acknowledges its obligation to direct that the district follow the above recited order of the governor and the secretary of the Department of Health, and directs the superintendent and president to sign and file the attestation therefore. Or E2, the school board authorizes and directs the continuation of the closure and continuance of total distance virtual remote plan of instruction, and authorizes and directs the superintendent to take all necessary steps to maintain that model, which shall cease, and the school district will revert to the AB hybrid plan first approved on August 27th, 2020, after 2 successive weeks of this district's counties being in a moderate category as defined by the Pennsylvania Department of Health and orders of the governor. But the school board acknowledges its obligation to direct that the district follow the above recited order of the governor and the secretary of the Department of Health, and directs the superintendent and president to sign and file the attestation therefore. Okay. In F1. Okay, the effective date of the change will be December 14th, or F2. Effective date of change in E2 will be, and you'd have to, the district's county being in the moderate level of transmission of COVID at the end of 2 successive weeks, and the superintendent shall direct the return of this district's different categories of employees of over or within, that would have to be defined, business days. Choose one without board approval or only with the board approval. And then G, the superintendent is authorized and directed to initiate, maintain, alter, and end furloughs of custodial and maintenance staff consistent with his choices in section E and F.
Mr. Petonic, do we need a motion in order to discuss this?
It's really the way you're supposed to do it with parliamentary procedure, so you know what you're aiming at.
Okay.
I would say, just for a point of clarification, under G, because the situation keeps changing, the superintendent is authorized and directed to initiate, maintain, alter, and end furloughs of custodial and maintenance staff. Would it also be cafeteria, Mr. Masha?
Yes, it would.
So would ask to insert the words cafeteria also.
So I need a motion.
I will make the motion that we follow option E2 and then corresponding F2 with, if we were to go for the 2 weeks back into moderate, I don't believe board approval is then again necessary for that. So I would choose without board approval is the motion that I would make.
I need a second.
I'll second that motion.
Discussion.
Can you just say what E2 is for everyone that doesn't have board docs?
Certainly.
Thank you.
So E2 was for the school board to continue distance virtual remote plan of instruction until the counties had moved into the moderate category for 2 consecutive weeks.
Thank you, Mrs. Raymond. Is there any discussion?
I would like to discuss some things.
Yes.
To
I'm
date,
sorry, who was the second?
oh,
I
The
was.
second was Mrs. Rhodes.
And was it under F2, was it subsection I without board approval or double I only with board approval?
It was without.
Correct.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Yes, Dr. Fike.
yeah, I would like to, I want to kind of a yes or no one-word answer. Is this information coming from the state a law? Is it a law or a recommendation?
It's the same, it's the same answer that I gave you the last time. It is still a recommendation. It seems like every time the virus gets worse, something else happens to come up with something else that's in order, and some other kinds of restrictions.
We
The
did, it is in
problem-
order to do the attestation, correct? That we have to
Pardon?
do.
You
It
have
is
to do
in
the
order that we
attestation.
have to fill out the attestation.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
and you have to follow what goes behind it, which means
Right.
you can't cheat.
Right.
You can't be having violations of the orders that go into explaining that. But to finish my comment, you know, my position is based going back on the problems with the liability insurance, which you were informed of at previous meetings as being jeopardized if you are seen as potentially violating those recommendations, let alone orders.
What is the difference between an attestation and a law?
Well, the governor did issue a valid order, in my opinion, for the attestation, so that one of those choices needed to be made and needed to be followed. So if you didn't do the attestation, you would have had to have stopped athletics and all extracurriculars, which would include athletics.
It's my understanding this is not a law.
I don't know how to say it. It's the recommendation for the models of instructions are still recommendations. That's true.
Okay, as long as we have been discussing this, there's never been the other side of the information related to this whole COVID thing. What they started out with last April or March or April is not the same thing that they now know and are doing. I would like to talk about the document called the Great Barrington Declaration, which has been signed by over 43,000 medical practitioners and scientists. This research was done initially by Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who's a professor of medicine at Stanford University. He said the real problem we have with these numbers is that there's a big difference between a case and an illness. And what he did was to determine the case fatality rate, he had to use particular research. So he did what is called seroprevalence. And that means that when a person is positive, that doesn't mean they have COVID. It means they have some COVID in their body, not that they have COVID, the disease. And what they do is they examine the person, measuring the blood contents, and they came to the conclusion, and his original study was duplicated 82 times in the world, 82 times. And the absolute total, the total fatality rate altogether from birth to year 100 is 0.2%. That's been validated 82 times. But he goes on to say, but the real truth is that there's a difference between what happens to young children and people over the age of 70. And he said that in young children, COVID is less dangerous than seasonal flu. He goes on to talk about how we have the situation upside down, where we're actually quarantining healthy people instead of sick people. But he said the real problem is that the widespread lockdown policy has been a devastating public health mistake. And as I said, over 43,000 medical practitioners have agreed with that. What this group does recommend is that schools and universities should be open for in-person teaching. Extracurricular activities such as sports should be resumed, and young, low-risk adults should work normally, not from home. I think the other thing that has come to the headlight, to the forefront of this, it is unsurprising about the psychological effects that these lockdowns have had on children who are being denied much needed socialization. He goes on to say that what we're doing is requiring young people to bear the burden of controlling a disease from which they face little or no risk. And this is entirely backward from the right approach. We have only ever heard from the people in Pennsylvania. Maybe you have all the faith in the world in Tom Wolf and that other person. I certainly do not. I do not. Early on, what people were doing, they were positive with COVID, and the first thing they did was stick a ventilator down their throat. And they realized they were killing people with ventilators by forcing the virus down into the lung tissue, instead of just giving them oxygen to help them breathe. We have treatments now. We have medications, hydroxychloroquine, Reservidol, whatever that is. There are many, many things. People are encouraged to take zinc and B12 and so forth. The CDC themselves have acknowledged that masks are worthless.
Dr. Fike, I don't think that's true. I think the CDC has been saying that a mask is beneficial. And I believe in looking back at documentation like what you're reading, I think you can read documentation and publications from the opposite side of the spectrum as well. And I don't think it really matters right now to anybody here what's going on at Stanford. I think that part of what the governor was saying today and Dr. Levine is that we need to be cognizant of what is going on in our hospitals right now, because the problem is going to be ventilators are being used by COVID patients. Ventilators are being used by other patients. Hospital beds are being used by COVID as well as other. But if somebody's spouse goes outside shoveling snow and falls over from a heart attack, you very well may not get care at your closest hospital because there may not be a bed for you. So all of this is done in the name of mitigating. I don't think anybody sitting on this board believes that children are best educated at home, nor do I think teachers want to continue down this route. I will agree that possibly children are not as affected. I believe they said today there were 32,000 children under the age of 18 that have been tested positive, 8,000 of those being in the last 2 weeks. But we have adults in those buildings, and not only do we need to be concerned about the adults being ill, but the adults being out on quarantine, the adults being out sick, and us not having enough staff to provide education for them. And I agree that these are not laws, they're recommendations, but when you sign your name to an attestation form, you are now saying that you will follow these rules, follow these recommendations. So where does it become not a law, but you're signing your name to a form saying this is what you're going to do, and you're going to follow all of these things to the letter? You know, I agree that we are affecting people's mental health. It's everyone. It's not just children. I don't think anybody sitting here tonight's mental health isn't affected by everything that's going on. But there are studies both ways. That's my point. And I'll just leave it at that. Is there any other discussion?
I would just like to say that I think one of the things that I have heard from parents or other people is having some sort of consistency. I think to go back to hybrid at this point, you know, effective Monday or whatnot would have been just, I feel like we're just getting into a pattern. I've gotten fairly positive feedback about the new instructional model with the live classes. And that seems to be working a lot better. I'm not saying there aren't still some issues, and I know that the teachers and the administration are reaching out to people who are having difficulties. And if they are not reaching out to you, I would also suggest for parents to take the initiative and reach out to your teacher or to your principal if there are difficulties. We can't fix problems that we don't know about. And I have found the teachers and the administration to be more than willing to help in whatever ways they can. But in terms of the consistency and the fact that, I mean, at this point, I think there are like 2 or 3 districts in the county that are not staying virtual until at least sometime in January. That includes public schools and private schools that are staying virtual at this point. And I just really don't see that there's any option or that there's any better solution at this point. I think what we're doing now is the most consistent thing to continue for the time being.
I
In
agree
the
with Mrs.
paragraph
Cheney.
regarding questions to administration, it said the teachers will take into consideration what they feel students can complete independently or asynchronously. And up above it, it says that at the high school, it will only be synchronous. So those are in conflict, and I don't understand why everybody isn't doing the same thing. Why is there not asynchronous or recorded programming done at the high school?
Mr.
Yeah,
Kraft
I
has a
think that
detailed plan that was submitted here, and he could better explain that.
I have gotten
Uh,
questions specifically about that, just asking if they could please have the lessons available as recorded like the other buildings are, just in case students aren't there. I've gotten several emails about that as well, Dr. Fike. I don't know the answer to that.
What's inconsistent, Christy? On one paragraph, they say you can do it, the other one you can't. And it's the same school district. I'm looking for consistency.
Well, I don't know if Mr. Krafcheck's on and can explain this, but I literally attached his plan so that you would have it.
I read them.
Apparently, the high school has the ability and has reasons why they feel that that is necessary to make sure that the students are engaged and staying engaged, and has the ability to do it. Whereas, as I understand it, and I would prefer that the educators speak up, not every other building has the ability to be completely synchronous with their entire teaching day. So that's why his is stated as a specific exception, because that is what is being proposed.
Yeah, I'll more than happy speak to that.
Thank you.
Our main goal throughout the remote setting was to increase participation and to increase active engagement in the educational process. And we've actually seen quite an increase in participation with the synchronous model. The reason that we promoted the live instruction first was centered around the fact that a lot of high school students are more self-motivated and independent, as a lot of them are young adults. We have not shut out the requests for synchronous or asynchronous learning. We have worked with families that have reached out, and as always, we encourage to reach out to the people like myself or Mrs. Sutton or the counselors to facilitate these requests, and we work with people. We felt that providing the option, would steer a majority of our learners into the synchronous model, which we think that it has. On one hand, where you speak of emails, I can speak of also numerous people that reach out and said, thank you for this system to allow us to really hold the kids at the high school level more accountable to participating in the program itself. We poured over data. We worked with people and come to the conclusion that, a lot of times the high school students, including, from my own experience, having a high school age kid, find that asynchronous learning is quote unquote voluntary, and it's not really school. And I have to implore the fact that we are still responsible for compulsory education, and we are responsible for educating the kids in a compulsory manner up until the age of 18. And every single family that has reached out and said this just doesn't work for our situation, we have accommodated them for it. And I'll speak independently here. Sometimes the high school operates a little different than the middle school. Sometimes the middle school operates a little differently from the elementary school. And I think that you have to examine the pedagogy, look at the data, examine what you think's best going to work for your educational body, and make the decision on what you want to see moving forward. And of course, as always, what we have done for years at the high school is keep an open mind and an open book for people that reach out to you and say this won't work. As we do with everything that we do, we will make something work for you.
So those students who aren't able to make this work, they're receiving the recorded lessons?
Those that have reached out to us specifically, we have set up asynchronous opportunities for them.
So are they getting the recorded lessons that were from class that day?
Not, I mean, I hate to paint with a broad brush and say that it's a recorded lesson. It's an asynchronous. Some teachers don't opt, they opt to want to do a lesson independent. That's them recording a specific lesson. I'm not going to disallow something of that nature because sometimes it cuts out the chit chat between students and whatnot. So we've worked in different ways to try to accommodate students. And again, reach out to us. We're there.
So I have a couple concerns, and after watching other districts' board meetings and seeing what they're doing with their high schools and it being synchronous or whatnot, here's two concerns. Number one is reaching out. If a student reaches out to you because this isn't working for them, and maybe it's not working for them because their parent can't be there and there's somebody who needs extra assistance, because all children are not created equal, that child now is not getting the same instruction that his peers are getting because we're not recording. So that's a concern for me, because your asynchronous simply means that these children are being sent YouTube videos of somebody else teaching and they're receiving work to do. My second problem is that I'm still receiving many, many, many messages from families that there is not lessons being taught. They're receiving a YouTube video to watch, the teacher is not instructing, or the teacher is popping on, giving an assignment and getting off. So I have a couple concerns about that. Shouldn't this be, teachers should have a plan, and they're following their plan, which would lead them to be teaching such and such on December 7th if they were face-to-face. So why is that not the same lesson being taught synchronously? Because I believe that's what we should be doing. So that leads me to the other question. Are these teachers not teaching when they're face-to-face and they're just handing an assignment? Or should we be teaching what we should have been teaching December 7th? So,
I mean, I think you're painting that with a broad brush and saying that this is the particular pedagogy that somebody is employing. I think there are a variety of strategies to teaching, and I don't know that it's the same across the board and for the same for different disciplines. I mean, if you're more than happy to call me and give me specific examples, I can pinpoint as to what you're talking about.
I guess
but to say that somebody's not teaching and as a broad brush statement, I think that's unfair to my staff. And
so
that's what you're saying.
Question? Is it acceptable for a high school teacher to be instructing through YouTube videos that are not of themselves? Is that acceptable? If it is, then
I guess it depends on the context. Is it after introduction? Is it after a particular setup? You know, to say that, I mean, if somebody's just throwing a YouTube video on and saying, you know, good luck, no, that's not acceptable. If it's integrated within the context of a lesson, then I think that, you know, that could be a strategy. I mean, I was in the classroom and I would lecture for 15 minutes and then put a segment of a video up for 10, spend 15 to 20 minutes working on independent or a group assignment. I'd have to see the context to make a blanket statement.
So my point is, I just want to make sure that the kids that need something different are able to get something different. And you're saying that they are.
Yeah, we'll craft whatever is necessary.
Okay. So
And if-
all
and
they have
if
to
the-
do is reach out to the office and they're good.
They don't have to reach out to the office. They can reach out to me or the assistant principal or any.
That's what I meant. I'm sorry.
school
That's what I
counselor.
meant by the office. Reach out to you.
I would like to verify that I have received some emails from parents thanking the high school for what they are doing. So, you know, I think the high school is making all efforts whatsoever to accommodate those individuals that are requesting it. And I would encourage families, if they are experiencing problems, to please reach out to a staff member at the high school. I've always found their willingness to reach out and support their kids. So I would strongly encourage parents, you know, to have conversations with Mr. Krofcheck and the counselors and Mrs. Sutton.
And I have gotten a lot of messages this past week specifically saying how much better virtual is going this time compared to the last time we were all virtual. I've gotten messages from teachers and parents especially praising teachers and how above and beyond they're going on these virtual lessons. So I think that part of it is very successful. I think that there's a huge difference between what happened last time and what's going on this time. So I think that's wonderful.
And I agree. Mr. Krofcheck, I was not trying to paint everybody with a broad brush and say this is everyone, but I have had numerous people reach out to me and make those statements. So I just want to be sure that and I get what you're saying. If you're filtering in a YouTube video to reiterate what has been taught, that's certainly one thing. But if we're only using a YouTube video to teach, that's something completely different. So that was just my only concern. And I am still concerned that if we're not recording, then those kids that need an alternative are not receiving the same thing that their peers are receiving. That's all I had on that. Is there any more discussion on the motion?
Mr. Krofcheck, I do have a question. Is it as simple as just pushing record when a teacher is teaching the class in the high school for it to be recorded and being able to be looked at it again by the student who maybe had difficulty the first go round, looking at it again in the evening, or how difficult is that?
That's not difficult. And again, we were looking at the broad, and I want to point out that we're a little over a week into an entirely new platform. And what we do, as we do with everything that we do, is take a look at what works, what doesn't, what will be beneficial to the students, and first and foremost. And, you know, just to put it out as a discussion piece, we want to try to avoid the situation. And again, this is why we open up our doors and say, look, we'll work with you with a particular situation. But I go back to a 17-year-old Dan Krofcheck and think, okay, A, get up at 7:30, follow my classes, or B, watch the recordings at 3 o'clock back in, you know, the early 90s when I was done with Nintendo 64 playing. And, you know, I'm probably picking B, and I'm trying to make the A portion the most important piece, because when you're live and you're able to, don't we all argue constantly that we want kids to be live with teachers? And when we are doing that, I think our best pedagogy is happening. So at the end of the day, if I just say, hey, young adult teenagers, here's option A, get up at 7:30 and follow the classes. Here's option B, you watch it when you feel like it. I'm probably going to get more B, which is what we get when we have asynchronous learning going on, and what people have told me and beat my ear about with a hybrid model. So the option C is, I'm struggling with this situation. I'm going to send an email, I'm going to call, or one of our counselors reach out to kids as they do every single day. What's going to work for you? This isn't working. You have younger siblings. Well, let's take a look to how we can make this happen for you. There's option C. By all means, if you want us to press record and make that as option B, and now the kids at the high school have A and B, you're the representative body. I will do what you suggest. It was just our way of seeing if we were able to increase participation. After week 1, we thought we saw an increase in participation, but as always, we're willing to adapt to whatever it is that's necessary.
I had a question.
I agree. It's much better than what happened in March. We can agree on that.
Is it possible to record the sessions, but then only have that available to people who reach out and say, here's why I need that? Don't just, post it and have it readily available, have recordings done and then have, only give them to students who reach out and say, here's why I wasn't able to attend or why I can't be on live. Can I have the recording? Is that something that's maybe the middle ground of not just having it out there for everyone as an option, but knowing that if you reach out and are in a particular situation, then maybe it is a possibility? I don't know. That seems like maybe a possible compromise.
I think some teachers do that they don't post it unless it's absolutely necessary in other buildings, which I think's a great idea. And then even if a student saw it but needs to review, they can send them the link and let them review it.
Yeah, and to that end, I have teachers that are taking a Sunday night knowing that the tech bus is going to be late the next day. They're doing an entire lesson in algebra so that those tech kids don't lose that 15 minutes. And they're doing that, I kind of like the holistic approach that we adapt to the environment that's necessary. And again, that it's kind of the slippery slope that you just allow asynchronous. Most people are going to choose it because most kids are going to choose asynchronous learning. It's just kind of a natural thing for people to want to do things on their own time. So yeah, I think most people are working with the situation in trying to help kids that are in specific need of a learning of a situation that's necessary.
So do you think that's something that would be plausible for the recording just to be optional for those students who are approved?
That's kind of what we're doing now. I mean, that's kind of my point. People that have reached out to us, we are working.
Are you recording the lessons though? That goes back to equity. And if we have children who are struggling with this and need assistance, they're not getting the same thing that their peers are receiving. They're not. Like if you're telling me they're not recording, that means that they're maybe posting YouTube videos, they're maybe giving them some assignments, but there would be no, synchronous type learning for them. They would not be visualizing their teacher every day providing instruction to them. So I'm certainly not talking about the kids who would rather get up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and just watch the videos again. Those aren't the kids that I'm talking about. So I'm talking about people that are truly reaching out to you. We can't accommodate them if we're not recording. I feel like every other teacher in the district is teaching and recording, and that should be the same thing that the high school is doing, because it's merely a matter of pushing a record button. It's not hard. It's not, there's other districts that have been doing it since the beginning of the school year. They're teaching in a classroom, they're live streaming, and they're recording all at the same time from their high school. So if we would have offered that option in the beginning, we might not have lost a lot of kids to SOLA. They might still be with the district. So I, in my personal opinion, and maybe other people feel differently, I feel we should be hitting the record button moving forward.
Mr. Krofcheck, you and I will discuss that tomorrow, and we can come to consensus. I do
Yeah.
understand the direction of the board.
All right.
Thank you. Do we have any other discussion on the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Krofcheck.
Mm-hmm.
Are you only discussing one of them?
Well, this was the motion that was made, so that's the motion we were discussing. So we would need a roll call vote on this, Mr. Petonic?
You do, absolutely.
Is that where we would move to now?
Unless there's further discussion on it.
Is there other discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Kristen Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes,
Yes.
Dr. Fike,
No.
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
No.
Mrs. Raymond,
Yes.
Mr. Carson,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
6 yes, 2 no, 1 absent. Motion carries.
I just want to point out that in this plan, if we were to decide to move to a different instructional model, we have to resubmit a new attestation form, but that is something that is possible moving forward. The other thing that I wanted to say was Mr. Mash had given the numbers for the counties on the 26th of November. As of last Friday, the number for Westmoreland County was 436.1 with an 18.9 positivity rate, and Fayette County is 354.9 with a 15.4% positivity rate. So that was just some updates, and the numbers really have been a lot higher. Also under new business, Act 1.
Excuse me. Be it resolved that A, the board authorizes that June 24th, 2021 at 7 p.m. is established as a special voting meeting for final budget adoption for fiscal year 2021-2022 general fund budget and establishment of taxation and for general business purposes, and May 20th, 2021 at 7 p.m. for approval of posting the proposed final budget. B, the board hereby sets a special voting meeting at 7 p.m. for approving the posting of a proposed preliminary budget for the above fiscal year and establishing a final date for adoption of Act 1 preliminary budget and/or an Act 1 preliminary budget opt-out. You must choose between the three Recommendations, January 21st, 2021, January 28th, 2021, or the board will wait until January 14th, 2021 to decide which date. C, the board authorizes and directs the solicitor to prepare the proposed resolutions and the administration to make the necessary preparations and the secretary to obtain and the treasurer to pay for additional advertising if needed for the meetings in section A and the meeting date chosen in section B for the reasons in 1 or 2 below. You have to choose 1 or 2. Number 1, both the resolution for preliminary Act 1 budget for the school fiscal year 2021 and 2022 and a resolution for an opt-out of the preliminary budget process at that point so that the board has both options open. The solicitor recommends preserving seeking exception to Act 1 index and or referendum to exceed index. Or number 2, only a resolution for the opt-out of the preliminary Act 1 budget process. Board cannot raise taxes in excess of the Act 1 index or pursue exceptions or further consider referendum to exceed by the Act 1 index. D, the business manager will present a draft proposed preliminary budget on January 14th, 2021. And E, the secretary will add the selected dates to the annual calendar for informational purposes, but still follow specific additional advertising as recommended by the solicitor.
If I may say something, my recommendation in C1 was based on 2 things. Because of the deadlines to meet the board docs submission, I did not know when I presented this whether or not it was possible to qualify for a special ed exception. Subsequently, I was informed by Mr. Marnell that we will not. So the reason for number 1 is if you wish to preserve even the possibility of further considering exceeding the index. Not that you would finally vote that way, but just that you wanted to keep it on the table for further consideration in the January budget deadlines.
Do we need a motion?
I'll make a motion for January 21st with C option 1 to keep everything on the table just in case.
I will second that.
Discussion?
Okay, you're saying that we will vote to keep the option open or not?
Voting, my motion was just to keep the option open since we don't have any of the final numbers from last year yet.
And that option is to exceed Act 1.
It's just an option.
Yeah, but that is the option.
Yes. And honestly, that's just because I don't know. I don't know the numbers, so that's my preference.
Is there any other discussion? If there's no other discussion, roll call.
Mr. Carson,
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
Yes.
Dr. Fike,
No,
Mrs. Kristen Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes,
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries 7 yes, 1 no, 1 absent.
Copy machines,
It is recommended that the board approve an agreement with, and you will need to make a choice, provide copy machines to the school district. Mr. Petonic, do we need to read both resolutions?
They were complicated enough, and that's why I separated them to make it easier for someone to have in front of them just what they wanted to propose. I don't know how to get around it other than reading both of them, not all the subsidiary documents, but the facial
Are we allowed to
requirement.
just read the one that someone actually motions for?
Well, if they want to read it. Sure.
Mrs. Smith, can I get clarity on what you just said? You're saying only read the resolution of the one that is proposed, correct?
Yeah, I was saying maybe we could wait for the motion and then read the one that someone motions to so that we don't have to go through reading all of that unless someone makes a motion for the other one as well, but just trying to save some breath.
Thank you.
How can you have two motions?
If the first one's turned down, then you'd have to read the second one anyway.
Oh, I thought you meant you could make two motions at the same time for discussion. Okay.
so if that's the way we want to proceed, I need a motion.
I'll make a motion that we accept the Wilson Group's proposal.
You have to also indicate whether you are choosing 1A, which is the unlimited option, monthly rental of $4,650 per month for equipment rental and print management services, or B, the cost for copy price, which is option 2 on the chart, for a term of 60 months for monthly rental of $2,670.45. So whether you want the unlimited approach or the cost per copy approach. Do you understand what I'm saying? I didn't realize until tonight that you folks couldn't see board docs and participate at the same time or have the resolutions in front of you. I just learned this,
Yeah. All right.
which explains why everybody's struggling.
Okay, as part of the motion, then I would say that we would go for the 60-month agreement and for unlimited.
I will second the motion.
Discussion,
As elected school board representatives, we have a moral and ethic and legal responsibility to be wise stewards of the taxpayers' money. We are, in my opinion, morally obligated to reject this bid, and we should take the bid of the lowest bidder, the lowest responsible bidder, which is not the Wilson Group. We owe that to the taxpayers.
So I'm curious about the unlimited. I'm under the impression after reading all this that maybe unlimited's not the way we want to go, that we could save money by going per copy. Does anyone that's on the committee have a recommendation for that?
Christy, I made that, I spoke to that at the last meeting. Whenever they decided, well, we're going to go back to these two companies and get more, I said we should not only get limited the price for CPC, but also the 36-month issue. To me, this information is not complete enough for us to make a decent informed decision, considering what's at stake for the future. I wanted both CPC, I wanted 36 months in addition to this. I did ask for it, Christie.
You better-
Candace,
You better.
what's your opinion on this, Candace?
He dropped it. He must have dropped it.
I think one of the reasons I feel like we went with unlimited was just for, not just for, but one of the benefits was the consistency budget wise of knowing exactly what you owe at all times. But quite honestly, I don't really have a significant preference. I think it could be possible to save some amount of money with the CPC model. I can't say I have a huge preference one way or the other, quite honestly.
Is there any other discussion?
On this chart, it says overage black and white cost per copy. Isn't that the same as the CPC or not? Mr. Petonic, do you know if that's the same cost it would be CPC?
You're gonna have, I'm sorry, reference which part of the document you're speaking
It's a
of.
chart. It's a chart. It's a chart.
Okay, now we're flipping over
And
to the,
it's toward the far right-hand side of the chart. It says cost per copy for overage, but when you get down to the copiers, they do give prices per copy. Am I right? Wouldn't that be the same as a CPC price? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that
see,
was,
there are two different levels of costs per copy.
yeah.
One is for strictly the print management services. And that's for the for the printers, I'm sorry, for the printers. And for the Wilson Group, that was 0.008 for black and white impressions and 0.08 for color impressions.
Yeah.
Okay, now, if you don't go with the unlimited approach, then you have two sets of cost per copy. One is for the print management services for the district's 16 HP printers, which is the same. But for the black and white impressions, it's 0.0027 for black and white and 0.027 for color impressions. Have I answered your question?
Yes, and then up at Toshiba, it's 0.00265 and 0.02650. Yes.
I think you're correct.
Yeah, there's two sets of those. The Toshiba is lower than the Wilson copy. Yeah. Well, all the prices for Toshiba are lower than the Wilson.
Did anybody look at our past year's usage for copies to see if, we would be in the ballpark on that per copy contract? I mean, I know we're talking about a whole different time we're in now, but do we have any kind of a base to go off of as far as usage?
The committee and Mr. Marnell might be able to better address that. I thought that was discussed at one of the finance committee meetings.
It'd be kind of important to know.
Well, Jim, that was the first question out of my mouth because I read that thing from the board minutes where the guy replied and said the school district should do a needs assessment for printing. That was the first question I asked. Now, there's the Toshiba guy said that he went through the district and looked at the machines and looked at the numbers. And that's why they added more machines. Toshiba's giving you more machines than Wilson. But he also pointed out where you have some machines that are like overused and some that are very much underused. And the problem, Jim, that he talked about was the fact that we now have Chromebooks. And Toshiba talked about the fact that we have Chromebooks. So you have to look at a needs assessment based on the fact that we now have a different mode of communication and instruction, which is not paper, which is cyber. So when you go to compare these numbers, you could probably take the numbers off last year's machines, but they're not this year's numbers.
Right.
But he said he works in many school districts, and Toshiba said, and he knows that the trend is less paper, more cyber. But that was the first question I asked, the very first question I asked him.
And
So
if
do we
I
have
can
the
just,
answer to that?
I'm sorry, Christy, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. I just said, so do we have an answer to how many copies? I think we asked that at the last meeting and someone said that they would get that information. How many total copies we had last year or the year before?
I don't remember if we had specifically from last year. I know whenever all the discussions we were having had been used on their evaluation of, I'm not sure the exact time period, but it averaged out to about 530 black and white copies per month and 26,000 color copies per month had been the average usage that everything had been based on and evaluated from. I don't know that that was necessarily just from this past year, though. But
I
those are the
think that's
numbers.
100,000.
Candace,
And
you
that's
have-
why I'm not trusting my memory. There's a number out there that is something, 530 or 560,000, but I'm not
Right.
sure if per month
I'm
or
sorry,
per
that's what I
year.
meant to say. 530,000 black and
Okay.
white copies per month. I'm sorry, that's what I meant to say.
But Toshiba recommended that we drop that 100,000. Remember that? He said
So-
drop it to 400 and some thousand because he said the indications are you should not buy what you don't need.
So I do remember that conversation, Dr. Fike, and the only thing I would say about that was that whole conversation was them promoting the use of their software, the PaperCut software. They said that PaperCut would allow us to monitor everything and be able to cut our usage by changing defaults and things like that. And they've now we've gotten to the point where we've taken PaperCut out of the equation. And we're not getting that as part of the package.
Candace, that was not the deal. The man said that the reason he was dropping it 100,000 is because he was projecting the use with our Chromebooks and the future use. That was the whole backbone of CPC.
Right, I understand, but they said that the PaperCut software, they said the PaperCut software was what would monitor that and change all that. And honestly, at this point, I have to say, I don't think either of these companies is a bad company. All I am concerned about right now is that our teachers get copiers that work. That is really the only thing that I am concerned with at this point. I know I don't have a horse in the race. I just want us to get some copiers for our teachers. That is really where I am at with this, quite honestly. So I think either company is going to be fine.
You said you called your friends at Hempfield and they said they were very happy with the.
They said they didn't, I mean, I wouldn't put words in their mouth. They didn't say they were very happy, but they said they didn't have any issues with Toshiba. I did not reach out to, I do have people who are in school districts that use the Wilson group as well. I didn't get an opportunity to reach out to those people. Like I said, I think both companies are going to take care of our needs either way. I just want to make sure I'm concerned about the lease that is expiring and I just don't want us to put this off any longer. So I just hope we can get something done. That's all.
So I have a question for Mr. Petonic. On the Toshiba agreement, it would be $4,324.42 for the unlimited, plus $200 per month for the plus printers. Is that correct?
If you want, $200 per month for print management services for the district's printers, yes.
Okay, so that would take that to $4,524.42. Correct?
Yes.
And then the Wilson Group is $4,650 per month for unlimited.
But they're not doing the
But
district.
for the printers, you are paying, let me double check here. Print management services for the printers, you're paying 0.008 for black and white. And for color, 0.08. However, what you haven't, no one has stated, but it's in the resolution. Only for option 1 unlimited with Wilson. And they had previously put this on the table. TWG commits to working with the district to review usage quarterly, and if a downward trend warrants less pages on an annual basis, will lower the embedded allowance of pages, which will lower the fixed monthly investment. Now that promise applies for the unlimited copies, which Mrs. Raymond and the motion has been made and seconded. track of who made the motion.
Did. I did.
Mrs. Rhodes and Mrs. Raymond, thank you.
Yes.
So,
So,
Mrs. Williams, have I answered your question?
yes, but I just have one more because I want to be sure that I'm correct. So there's only a difference of $125.58 per month between the two of these companies. Is that what that equals out to? Because for some reason I was thinking there was a much larger difference between the two.
Well, the difference is, and I didn't do a calculation. I don't even know how it would be multiple
Right, because
algebraic calculations, because the Toshiba fixed price at $4,324.42 offers print management services for an unlimited amount for a fixed price of $200. The TWG Wilson Group option 1 is for $4,650, and the printers per copy are 0.008 and 0.08 respectively for black and white and color. So, depending upon what happens with the district's printers has an effect on the overall cost. And that's all I can say. Because otherwise you have to make assumptions about usage and then plug them in the calculations to figure out break points. And I thought that was beyond my purview. Because I don't know what assumptions to make. You can make assumptions and do the math.
I'm concerned about, I agree that going into the future, we may not need to be making an unlimited amount of copies. However, right now, I don't feel that we have curriculum to use the Chromebooks to the most efficient way without curriculum. So I'm also still concerned that, K1 and 2, they're still learning printing and writing and copying and those types of things that they're doing over and over and over again. So I'm not so sure that without curriculum, we're in any different place than what we are right now. Yes, it would be great to say we have Chromebooks and we can use them, but you still somewhere have to purchase curriculum for them. So that's where my concern is. So I am concerned that when we get into this $4,650 plus still paying per copy, that could be a lot of money. I mean, I'm not sure. If we're taking every copy that we make and multiplying it by either 0.008 or multiplying it by 0.08.
No. You're misunderstanding.
Okay.
Those numbers are only for the printers, the 16 HP printers, not the Wilson supplied Sharp copiers.
Okay, so do we use these printers a lot? How many are there?
16.
16?
Yes.
This is what we own,
You
Michelle.
own them. You already own them.
We
So if the Wilson Group didn't give you this quote to manage them, you would need to be dealing with somebody to repair them, fix them, that sort of thing.
Do we know how many copies we make how many things we print out of those?
I do not.
Nobody
I don't know if the committee does. I don't know if anybody does.
Michelle, these copy machines that we own, we would have to come up with another contract with another agency to come in and do something to maintain them, repair them, put the ink in them and all that stuff. So you would, without that $200 thing that covers them, we would have to make another contract with another agency and add it to the price of the Wilson bid. Because they don't offer that. They don't offer that.
No, wait a minute. The Toshiba folks are willing to do that for $200 a month under option 1.
Right.
The Wilson Group is doing it as part of the motion that has been moved and seconded to do it for those two prices that I quoted you for the black and white and the color. So you're not going to be dealing with another contractor. It's one or the other. It's either Toshiba or the Wilson Group.
Well, that's per copy though. That's per copy.
Yes,
That's price per copy.
yes.
So how, okay, what is that? We don't
What do you
know.
mean?
We don't know
I
how
do-
many copies because there's 16 machines involved.
I do
I'm just
not.
saying for the $200, you have the guarantee. With Wilson, you're going to have to pay for each copy, and that's on 16 machines. Isn't it 16?
I don't even know if you're going to continue to use those 16 machines. But you know, this is the way this was
Nobody said
bid,
that.
and that's what we have.
Nobody said that at all. Nobody ever said we weren't going to use those machines. That's new to me.
I mean, all of them, all of them.
So total machines in the whole district that we have is what again?
James Christie of the,
It's 16 printers plus the copiers that was supplied, the Wilson Group quote, which I think is, shoot, I don't have my chart in front of me.
So how could we not use those 16 printers if that's all we have?
I don't know either way. I'm just saying that. I don't know either way.
If you're saying we only have 16 plus what,
No, 16 that we own,
16 that you own.
that we own.
Right. And those printers are like, they're in like, I think maybe like the food service office and the athletic director office. I'm trying to find, we had information about what we owned and I'm trying to look and see it.
So
but
those don't
what is being
include-
provided to us through either group is like 23 copiers, like big, huge copiers that are being provided.
Those would be the ones like in the office and in the second grade hall supply room and those types. Is that what those new ones would be?
The new ones, yes.
Yeah.
The new ones would be
Okay.
like, yes.
So those are the ones that get maximum hardcore use. And those are
Yes.
the ones that right now aren't very fun to deal with. So that makes a lot more
We
sense.
would replace,
Yes.
we would replace everything we're using now. We have that contract with Xerox. Their machines go and the new ones come in, except Toshiba's giving us 2 more.
Honest to goodness, I am so confused about all this. From what I just listened to, for some reason, I thought we were still going to have those old copiers that clearly weren't that great. Okay, so we're getting all new copiers in the offices, in all of the teacher supply things, is what I'm assuming. That's the important part, because those are the ones that are ridiculously hard to work with and break all the time. So we
Yes,
just
that
need to decide who we're going to use.
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
And I mean, once again, like I said, I think either company is fine. The reason I seconded Gail's motion for Wilson is I feel like there are a couple of intangibles that I, just from meeting with them, that I liked, but once again, I'm not like willing, it's not the hill I'm willing to die on. So like, I just want us to pick somebody.
Yes, please.
The
I agree.
location of all of the printers and the printers themselves are in the documentation that I submitted for board docs.
Okay.
can somebody that was on the committee tell us the difference in price total for the 5-year contract?
I just got out of that. Hold on.
Well, these are our new proposals, so they weren't, these are different numbers than what the committee met with, you know, weeks ago. I don't know that, I mean, does the committee know? I mean, I don't know how they would.
No, not off, I mean, not unless I just did the math right now,
Right.
that like these weren't any numbers that we had before, just, you know, just recently.
These are lower numbers from both entities.
Yes.
It's a good thing we don't do this every year.
Oh, my goodness.
After that. So Toshiba is 4324.42 plus the $200 to take care of the printers, which comes to $4,524.42. Is that right? Did anybody else do the math?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's see.
Those numbers are on the chart.
45, 45, 24.
And then the Wilson Group would be 4650 plus we don't have the information to know how much we're going to pay for the printers to be serviced.
Right.
Without that even included in there, it's a difference of $125.58 per month, plus whatever it would be to take care of the printers. Sheba is at $125.58 cheaper per month, which is going to equal out to $7,534.80 over the course of 5 years.
Okay, so can I make a motion? We go with Toshiba with the unlimited?
I think we have to get rid of the first motion. Can you make a motion to table that, Mr. Petonic, or do we?
Motion to rescind if they want to rescind it.
We had a motion and a second. It hasn't been voted on. Are you saying that you now want to make a motion to table that and take up consideration of a Toshiba motion?
If
would
Mrs.
be the next
Rose,
step.
if Mrs. Rose wants to rescind her motion, or we can vote on this motion, and if it doesn't pass, we can move forward on the other one. That's up to Mrs. Rhodes.
Well, I understand the point about the price difference. But when we met with the group, I just had a good feeling with them. I felt that they would work with us. You know, the owner himself we talked to. I was impressed with that group. I thought they would do us a good shake, but I'm tired of the whole situation. I agree with Candace. I think that either group would be okay. I like the small business aspect with the Wilson Group. But
I mean, can we just vote on this motion, and then if it doesn't pass, someone can make another
yeah, let's
motion?
do that. Okay, let's do that. That's fine.
Roll call, Peggy.
Just unmute.
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes,
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Christy Smith,
No.
Mr. Carson,
No.
Dr. Fike,
I've done everything I can to help the taxpayers in this school district. My vote, of course, is no.
Mrs. Williams,
I give up.
motion failed.
Was it no?
4-4. One absent.
So, Mr. Petonic, can I ask for another motion?
Yes.
I'll make a motion for Toshiba.
I second the motion.
You have to tell us whether it's 1A or 1B, which is the unlimited at the fixed price or the cost per copy approach.
I'm gonna go with the unlimited.
$4,324 per month, plus the 16 HP printers at a fixed price of $200 per month. Correct?
Yes. And I could give the reasoning for that because we don't have curriculum on our Chromebooks yet. And I don't know with our budget when we're going to be able to. So that would be my vote for now.
Is there any other discussion?
I just have one comment. I thought the whole purpose of having committees was to have them figure out what they recommended, to come back to us to make the meetings less lengthy. So, but then we still sit here and criticize everything that the committee come up with and throw out the window what they suggested. It's just frustrating. That's all I wanted to say.
Is there any other discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Raymond,
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
No.
Mrs. Kristen Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams, I'm sorry, Mrs. Rhodes,
No.
Mr. Carson,
Yes.
Dr. Fike,
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries 6 yes, 2 no, 1 absent.
I have something I want to say about this. When we're talking about entering a 5-year contract with someone such as this and the expense that it was, first of all, I'm not even sure that that all members of the committee were aware that they were going to sit in on this in the beginning. I think this was a very big decision and a whole lot of money for the committee to come back. I can only look at the data. I can only look at the numbers and make a determination from the numbers. And I think as to be fiscally responsible, I think that we should be looking at, I have to look at now what was the least expensive for the district. So that's why I went against what the original recommendation was from the committee. I just think that when it's something this large, these presentations should be made to the entire board. That's my opinion moving forward. And thank God I won't ever have to do that again anyway.
Right on.
So moving on, volunteer varsity girls basketball coach.
Board is asked to consider approving Rick Thomas as volunteer varsity girls basketball coach.
I need a motion.
Make the motion.
I'll second.
Second. Heather Smith,
Yes.
discussion. Roll call.
Mrs. Rhodes,
Sorry. No.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Carson,
Yes.
Dr. Fike,
No.
pardon,
No.
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries. 6 yes, 2 no, 1 absent.
Middle school head volleyball coach.
The board is asked to approve Heather Meyer as head middle school volleyball coach, the supplemental salary of $2,675, which is the supplemental from the 2019-2020 school year.
I need a motion.
I'll make
I'll
that
make the
motion.
Oops, I'll second it.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
Yes.
Kristen Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Carson,
Yes.
Dr. Fike,
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries 8 yes, 1 absent.
Middle school assistant volleyball coach.
Board is asked to approve Leanne Richter as middle school assistant volleyball coach at a supplemental salary of $2,597, which is a supplemental cost from the 2019-2020 school year.
I need a motion.
I'll make the
Make
motion.
them,
Sorry, Jim.
a second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mrs. Kristen Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Carson,
Yes.
Dr. Fike,
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes,
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries 8 yes, 1 absent.
Winter sports coaches for the 2020-2021 winter season.
The board is asked to approve the attached list of the 2020-2021 winter sports coaches. All clearances are on file.
I need a motion.
Before I make a motion, I'm assuming all of these people on this list have already been voted on and approved by the board, correct?
Yeah, yes. Let me double, the one. Messina, Pasula, Barkley. Yes, not, I don't see any that was not. Do you, Mrs. Tarzan?
No, everybody was already approved. Everybody has been on.
Okay, I'll make the motion.
I need a second.
A second.
Second.
Discussion.
I do want to say that after we're done going through these next couple things, I would like to walk onto the agenda advertising for an assistant girls basketball coach for the high school, because I believe we still need that, which we would have to add that name after it's figured out to this list.
What did, I can't remember, what was Mrs. Badero approved for as a
Volunteer.
Volunteer. And I believe she is listed that way on this list as well, in this directory. Is there any other discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Carson,
Yes.
Dr. Fike,
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes,
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries 8 yes, 1 absent.
High school, middle school volunteer wrestling statistician.
Board is asked to consider approving Austin Macbeth as a volunteer statistician for the high school, middle school wrestling program. Clearances are on file.
I need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Questions? Discussion? Roll call?
Dr. Fike,
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes,
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Carson,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries 8 yes, 1 absent.
Voluntary deletion of specified credential.
Board is asked to approve, at the request of Morgan Coleman, the removal of special education pre-K through 12 instructional 1 and 2 9225 from her teaching certification.
Motion?
I'll
I'll
make
make
that
the
motion.
motion.
Whoa.
It was Gail first.
Second was Jason.
Yes.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Polakowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Raymond,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes,
Yes.
Mrs. Heather Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Kristen Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Carson,
Yes.
Dr. Fike,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries 8 yes, 1 absent.
Mrs. Smith, you had something that you wanted to walk on?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules.
I need a
Take
second.
up consideration of what?
Yeah, why?
Advertising outside of the school district for an assistant basketball coach for the girls' high school team. At least that's what I was told that we needed to do because we don't have an assistant basketball coach. If Mr. Boring, I see he hopped on. If that's incorrect, go ahead and jump in.
No, at this time we don't have one, so we would post it just to have it out there and see if anybody else applies.
As a paid employee.
And Mr. Boring, just so you know, some of the things that were brought up were that we only have one paid employee for the high school girls right now. So if something would happen, we would need to have someone else as an employee. That's why that was brought up.
Yes. Yep.
So do we need a second to suspend the rules or do we need a second?
We do.
Okay, so I
I'm
need a
sorry.
second.
Yes.
I need
I'll
a-
second that.
Okay. And then do we walk on the motion?
You really should ask for public comment. I'm not sure how you do that.
Why now? We've done so many walk-ons that we've never asked for public comment before.
Well, I don't know how to do it in Zoom, but I'm just, mentioning it.
So there's one other item that we have not discussed tonight either. So if we're walking items on and allowing for public comment in the middle here, that's fine.
I don't know how the public knows to get on is my point.
Well, wouldn't we have closed, wouldn't it be the same in citizens' comment for them to get on?
I would assume that. So somebody would have to be calling in.
And the only reason why I wanted to do it now was because the season's starting and we don't have an assistant basketball coach. And if we have to wait until January to advertise, this is our last meeting this month.
I'm not criticizing your motive. I'm just,
Well, they actually have two, they have two assistant coaches now that we're just not paying them. So,
Are they considered assistant?
well, not assistant, or volunteers or whatever they are, they're still, they have, they have coaches. So let's get it walked on and worry about it later.
Mr.
We don't need
Petroni,
it. We don't need it. I just
for
need
you,
somebody.
if somebody wanted to make a comment now, they would have had to have called in this afternoon. Isn't that what our policy is? You have to call in during the afternoon to say that you want to make a comment. And if that's the case, it's not possible for them to do it now. You wouldn't know ahead of time.
Well, I think it's very similar to if someone's in the live meeting, when we have them in the cafeteria,
Right.
if you walk something on, only so many people are in the cafeteria, those watching it, which would be the same here. If someone's watching it now, they could call in and say, I want to make a comment on this.
can
they
Mrs.
They can just
Tarson
call- they can
hear,
Definitely call in.
can Mrs. Tarson hear if somebody wants to call in now?
I can hear, but the people don't know to do that because they're only supposed to call in until 6 o'clock, I believe it is on the.
But I mean, if someone is watching now and wants to comment, they can call in and you can pick up that. call.
Right, yes.
That should be added to our policy then, right?
Well, I mean, I think if somebody wanted to comment, they would have, called in at the very beginning and been on the list. So then they could be invited back in. But I think you're providing a method for that to happen because if somebody's watching, they can see that something wants to be added to the agenda.
I just don't can you explain to me why we've done this so many times in the past few months and we have not one time done this and said that we need to break for a citizen's comment on something we're walking on?
You're making a mistake.
Well, that's what happens when we were back in live mode. You've provided a method for some people to submit comments and to speak, and we've had speakers.
But not for walking on something.
Well, I mean, just to be clear, I mean, it's still an issue.
I agree that.
And we don't have to have.
An issue.
No, I think people should call in. I think they should be allowed to comment. I just assumed that people could call the same number if they're watching now. They could call the same number and comment.
Well, I think that's what Mrs. Tarson is telling us. That she can accept a call.
Wow.
Dr. Fike, can you tell me your thoughts on this? Because I can hear saying no, and I can
Christie,
see.
it's a matter of policy. And because we have not done it in the past means that we were in error in the past. Walk-on items were always subject to public comment before any action was taken because it was a walk-on. It was not on the agenda. Let's put it that way. Nobody had prior warning that something was happening. So as a result, up until now, it was always a standard procedure where people were allowed to comment on walk-ons. Now we have a policy that says you've got to call by 6 o'clock. Hey, I don't care what you do, Christy, but policy is policy to me, but not to other people. And that's okay.
So-
That's okay.
So nothing addresses this in what we've already put out.
Not
I
with
thought
that
the
degree.
policy was that if you advertised it within the bargaining unit, after that, it goes to the outside. We didn't have to vote
That's not what
together.
we're talking about, just having citizens comment on this. We're not even.
Well, I understand, but I didn't even think we even had to have, we shouldn't even gone that far. I thought if, after it was advertised in the school, it didn't have to go any further. It just did its thing. It went to the outside. Is that not right?
No, because you're spending money, so the board has to approve to spend
With
money.
advertising. Okay, I see. Okay.
Right, well, if we can't have
Correct.
citizens' comments, then I agree. People should be able to comment, and we need to have a policy in place for that. So I guess I would have to walk on, if I could, a policy that says people can watch the meeting, and if they want to comment on something that's walked on, then they should call Mrs. Tarzan's phone number. So,
Christy, I think this goes to a bigger problem. Now, I'm not asking to be involved, but to the best of my knowledge, I have no clue how you even get an item on the agenda. It's done by some authority in the sky there, and that's it. I've never, ever even had the option of putting something on. This is something you should have been able to put on the agenda. Had you known, and so I think there's the problem, Christy.
I agree.
Procedure for getting something on the agenda. You're forced to do a walk-on if you can't do an agenda item. I don't know how you get on an agenda, do you?
No.
It comes up at the planning session
Your planning.
or the superintendent. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mrs. Tarson.
That's what you have your discussion, your planning session. Those are the things that you're going to put on the next voting meeting, but you do have things that come up during the week that you need to add on. Things come up.
So one person could call in, Peggy, and say, I want to put something on the agenda. Can you do that?
I believe that it's 3 people. If 3 people ask for something to be on the agenda, it can be on the agenda.
Board members.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
Prayer.
I think that's just if it's not on the agenda we're presented. Like Mr. Masha and the president make the agenda.
But once it's out, Christy, the public has no notice that this item is going to be discussed. That's where the catch-22 is.
Yeah.
So if there was a meeting next week, you wouldn't have a problem, but there's no meeting for a long time. And therein lies the problem with trying to get this advertisement out. Am I right?
That's the impression that you're giving me. Yes.
So, Mr. Boring, I have a question that maybe you can answer. So, when do wrestling matches start? When do basketball games start? What are we doing with spectators?
Competition is scheduled to begin Friday. The PIA meets again on Wednesday to determine whatever they're going to do. I don't foresee any changes coming. That's what the indication has been. So as of now, it's on schedule for Friday. I know we had talked a little bit today. The original policy for winter sports was 2 spectators per home participant, no visiting spectators. So, Mr. Mash had made the recommendation earlier for no spectators while virtual.
Mr. Boring, what was the athletic event that was held at the high school on Saturday morning, if there was one?
It was a scrimmage. Wrestling.
A scrimmage of what?
Wrestling.
A wrestling scrimmage. And was it strictly Southmoreland students?
No, it was Southmoreland and Fraser.
Okay, so the fact that our buildings are closed, somebody help me with this, because some parents are concerned that the buildings are closed to our kids essentially for their education, but yet somebody from another school district can participate in a sport in our building, and then we're responsible to pay for the cleaning of that building. Is that not true?
I mean, we've handled most of the cleaning on our own from this point. We don't use bleachers. Things haven't been used. We clean the mats for wrestling. So in terms of cleaning, there really hasn't been much usage of locker rooms, bleachers, anything else. So.
Was there cleaning?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I had a couple of people were very upset that there's no school but sports are on. I'll tell you that up front, and I'm not dying on that hill either. But the question was using our facility that has to be maintained and cleaned on our dime for students from another school district, which under the COVID thing, I would think would be a concern. But I guess it just is okay because we voted for winter sports or whatever that was.
Well, I mean, it does support our students as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I understand that, but our kids are not allowed in school for education. That's what
I get both sides of the argument. I do.
So was that the policy on Saturday? Was there were no spectators at that?
Scrimmages have always been closed practices, so there have never been spectators. Up until this year, we did the test run with football. But otherwise, every year that I've been here, all scrimmages were usually closed anyway, so there were no parents.
So when is the first girls' basketball game?
So with everything, their tip-off was canceled next week. Their first game wouldn't be till December 22nd, which before all this was their actual next scheduled game because Greensburg-Salem had to quarantine and they paused and can't begin game play until the 26th. And their game with another team was also paused because of that team pushing things back as well to start date later in December because of quarantining. So their first real game would be December 22nd as of now.
The first game would be the 22nd.
Correct.
So, Mr. Petonic, you were saying we cannot walk on to advertise to hire for this coach.
Now, I think that if someone's watching, you know, and is interested, they still have an opportunity to call in. I mean, I recognize the problem of not having you know, 1000% safe way, because one of the big reasons for calling in is to prevent people from showing up unexpectedly with malign intent, who, you know, they may not even be district residents or have a right to speak and just start uttering profanities or what have you, and not be able to then subsequently identify them. Whereas with a live meeting, you know who's there, and if they do something, you know, criminal, at least they have the potential of being identified and arrested. And that acts as a deterrent.
So if we wait until January to do this, then basically by the time we advertise and allow for that time frame, we're looking at February till we would possibly have somebody hired, probably.
Well, don't you think that this discussion's been going on long enough that if somebody was interested in what, and they were watching this and were interested in commenting, that they would have had plenty of time to call Mrs. Tarzan to indicate that. So, you know, I don't, you're right, Christy. I believe we did move on before. It's either, let's either move on or what are we doing here? That's my opinion. It's been long enough. Someone could have called in by now.
Mrs. Smith, do you want to make your motion?
It's already been made. We were waiting for the comment and there hasn't been any. So it'd be to call the question to vote
Well,
on it.
truthfully, I wasn't expecting the whole citizens comment thing because we haven't done it before, but obviously we were in error before. So I think that I'm taking back mine. If someone else wants to make the motion, go for it. I'm rescinding my motion.
Okay, moving on. Citizen comment.
Yeah, yes, Jan has some comments that he'd like to make.
Thank you, Jan Kiefer. With Mr. Marnell down, I thought it would be our backup, Bill Porter, coming in to help. I'm sure it could have been, but with Mr. Marnell, you know, with the world in an economic depression, we would like some of your long-winded talks about where the school district is in this day, in this age, considering, you know, the historic nature of it. I want to see our recorded task force meetings now on vaccinations. That's a long subject. And the World Health Organization, if I'm correct, is pro-vaccination to the extreme. They're up there. And when Mr. Masher says sustainable, I'd like him to direct me to studies showing schools as transmissions sources. And the schools band together, they can stand up to the state agencies. I'm getting through here. Don't forget about the harm of the masks. And we need to be allowing the comments on the YouTube streaming when this meeting is up. Those comments you don't have to monitor as a board, but that's another avenue for the public to participate. And I've asked for this directly. Mrs. Williams, I believe, addressed a lot of these issues 4 months ago or even longer ago, so we might have all forgotten. What about the silent treatment we're getting from the teachers? I always enjoyed it the most when Mr. Ansel or Mr. Cavalier and all the others would come in and speak from time to time, or a statement came out from the teachers. I wish we would have that come into the conversation here. If I could just finish up on the public commenting. Someone who—
Mr. Keifer, you have 30 seconds.
Someone who would not even tune in tonight because there was never a way to comment in. So it's not realistic to think that someone would call in and do that. And you can't say because a potential crime might be committed on your YouTube that you're going to snuff out or choke off one of our avenues for public comment. And certainly we can have a standing account of some sort, but you can't expect everyone to sign up for public comment on the idea that there might be something in the agenda they want to talk about at the end of the period or after a walk-on item.
Your time's up. Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
No.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
I write emails, letting the people who read them, and I don't ever send them. I've never recorded